People talk a lot about soccer miracles and sporting miracles. What's happened here is, I think, as near as you're going to get to a miracle in sport. 3 years ago, 1.6 million in debt, a few minutes from bankruptcy. And apart from that, relegated to Division 3 and with a playing staff that had very little to commend it. So what's happened since has been, I think, probably the most remarkable transformation in modern soccer history.
It's been a bit of an insult to the Derby County supporters over the years to have to come and watch us play in the 3rd Division after everything that's gone on here over the last sort of 15, 20 years. When you've got the likes of Juventus, Real Madrid and European football glory days that were here, it's rather disappointing when they have to come and watch us scratching around in the 3rd Division.
Arthur Cox is one of the unsung heroes of football, who gets on with his job without letting too many people know about it. So that is a distinct quality in itself. His ability to buy players to get them out of the 2nd Division this season has been second to none. He went for players who could do a job, and good players as well, and kept it within the bounds of sensibility.
Will make more money available as required to improve facilities and to enable the managers to buy players to start building a team that will turn top honours, which is the kind of glory that Derby County has enjoyed many years before, both at home and in Europe.
That's it. Just a little bit higher now, Phil. That's good.
Well, the England goalkeeper's coming along. He's going to strengthen everything around the club and play a part, I would think, on and off the field. I mean, he's quite a character. He's a superb ambassador for both the club and for England, and I think we've got an absolute bargain.
Not so long ago, the chances of England's #1 goalkeeper joining Derby County were about as remote as the club getting back to the 1st Division. In 1987, both those things happened. They're the latest chapter in a story that's being rewritten almost every day. A story of league championship wins back in the 70s, relegation and near bankruptcy in the early 80s, boardroom politics, sacked managers, and every now and again, a game of football. You can tell when the Rams have done well. The band plays, the streets are lined, the bus is open top. This was the civic reception to mark promotion to Division 1. The trophy, the one in the middle, wasn't much to write home about. Cut glass instead of silver. But no one was complaining, especially after what had gone wrong in the recent past.
Chronic mismanagement at all levels of the club. I think a lot of it was chasing the tail over Brian Clough's departure. They always felt they had to have someone who shouted louder than Brian Clough. They always felt that they had to have someone who would drown the noise of the acclaim of what was happening at Nottingham Forest. And I think too many of the managerial appointments were made with that in mind, instead of someone who could come in and do an honest, dignified, straightforward job and stick to the sort of standards that Clough had produced here when he'd created an era of success.
How close was this club to going out of business 3 years ago?
It was on the brink. It was as close as that, basically. We couldn't pay the wages week in and week out. We couldn't pay the laundry bills. The High Court knocked us back 3 times. And eventually, when we did manage to raise $125,000, pay off the revenue, Judge Mervyn Davies allowed us to go on, and here we are today.
The size of Derby's support was one reason why the judge allowed the club to live. Rams fans have a passion for their team. They may not go to the ends of the earth, but several thousand did travel to Bournemouth. It was 1984. Derby were in Division 3. They lost the match 1-0. At that time, the supporters could only dream about glory. The FA Cup was Derby's first important trophy, yet the club had always been thought of as a big one because it bought star players. In 1949, the chairman, Ben Robshaw, was caught paying those players higher wages than the football authorities allowed. He was banned for life. The stars stopped coming. Until the mid-60s, the local paper still wrote about the 40s, a nostalgia column made more inspiring reading than the contemporary reports. In 1967, Brian Clough became manager, and that was about to change. He came down from Hartlepool with his assistant, Peter Taylor. The pair were hired by an ambitious new chairman, Sam Longson. With wage restrictions lifted, the three had big plans for Derby. Within months, Clough and Taylor were knocking on a door in Liverpool, trying to sign a centre-half.
I came down and we had a good chat, which took us to about 2 o'clock, 2:30. And I said, well, I'd like time to think it over. I think to make a decision of leaving my family, which I would have had to have done at that time, because I was a young lad of 18, 19. And they said, well, if you want to think it over, we'll sit here until you decide. So I turned to my father and I said, well, what do you think? He said, well, if they want you that badly, son, I think you should sign. And I signed. And as soon as I signed, no sooner was the ink dry, that they were out of my house and they'd gone, and that was the end of it.
Dave Mackay joined Clough and Taylor in 1968. He'd won almost all there was to win at Spurs. He became one of the highest paid footballers in the country, fought to provide leadership and to pass on his know-how to a young but promising squad. It was the classic blend of youth and experience, and best of all, it did work.
He did all the running and chasing, and I did, now and again I had to make a tackle and that type of thing. But I enjoyed that particular thing. But these lads worked hard around me, and it was easy for me to help them with my experience and everything else.
Mackay and his lads won the second division title at a canter. The old man enjoyed 2 more years at the top.
Wall, Charlton, Kidd, Styles, Crevin. Very Carlin, number 8's over the ball. Now it's Mackay. Right through the gap! Oh, dear, 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 dear. Dave Mackay. Oh, that Manchester United really looks sorry for themselves now. Dave Mackay.
The band played in 1972, the streets were lined, the bus was open top. Brian Clough's Derby County won the Football League Championship for the first time. The manager was famous for his outspoken views. The players were to become famous throughout Europe.
Derby set for a short one, and Hector and Hinton. Hinton. And it's Hinton going to take the corner. Not a short one this time, but again aimed towards McFarland. Hector. Yes! He's full of football. McFarland. Daniel. Loose. McGovern.
Derby reached the European Cup semi-finals in 1973. All appeared buoyant at the baseball ground. It wasn't.
I was with Roy McFarland and Colin Todd and I think David Nish. We was down on England duty down London, and we were sat having a cup of tea in the lounge in the hotel, and someone came over and says, "Have you heard the news?" And we says, "What news?" He says, "Brian Clough's resigned." And we said, well, he's joking, you know, there's no way.
Basically, he fell out with his chairman. And that was all to do with the sort of things that Brian Clough was saying in the papers, the fact that he got himself a television job and came up with some very outlandish things, most of them perfectly true to my way of thinking. But Sam Longson found himself having to defend himself when he went to other clubs. He would go to Leeds or to Manchester United and they'd say, "Can't you control your manager?"
It's not a fight between Brian and myself and Peter. It's a fight between, shall we say, right or wrong.
I don't see it as a battle at all. I resigned and they've accepted it. Peter and I are now officially finished with the Derby County Football Club.
Can you tell us why you resigned?
Brian, can you just answer?
That is the last question. Thank you very much indeed.
The manager and chairman had been friends. They became enemies after Longson put out a statement claiming that Clough had demanded unreasonable pay rises and fiddled his expenses.
I think it's a statement from a man who's not quite with it at the moment. I won't go so far as to say he's sick. Other people will determine that. And I think it is a statement which could destroy Derby County Football Club, and it already has destroyed him.
Autumn 1973, the band played, the streets were lined. This time there was no open-top bus because there was nothing to celebrate. The supporters were the centre of attention, marching on behalf of Brian Clough. The chairman, Sam Longson, far from destroyed, was still running Derby County Football Club. At least he thought he was, for at first not just the fans, but the players were against him.
We spoke to the PFA to see what our rights were and where we stood, and there was talk of strike and everything else. Luckily, it never got to that, because the one thing that the club did do, which they'd done very quickly, was to get a new manager.
I went in there and had a chat with them, a few strong words, but nothing really fantastic, and we didn't win for 9 games, so there was a lot of problems there. I think if we'd gone on another half a dozen, I'd have been out of job, and I don't think it would really been my fault.
But the former captain kept the manager's job and won the league championship in 1975. He did it by adding proven goal scorers to Clough's squad. He bought men of experience and style.
Interesting. Very interesting. David Nish. Gamble. George! Oh, I say cracker! Applause all around the ground, and my word, he deserved it. That's as good a first-time shot as you'll ever see.
The chairman, Sam Longson, was loving it and took the penalty spot home. The rest of the muddy old pitch was also replaced. Some of the directors who'd remained loyal to Clough wanted Mackay replaced. The baseball ground became a breeding ground for politics and pressure on the manager.
You could play great on the Saturday and you can go into a problem on the Monday, which shouldn't really happen.
And that was peculiar to Derby, was it?
Well, it happens in football anyway, but I think I had a lot more problems at Derby than any other management. When the team is doing well, and at the top of the league or near the top of the league, and things are going really well for the club, I think things should go well during the week. You're always going to have a transfer request and things like that. But I had more than my share.
Foul. Cardwell forward. Davis, not a good return ball.
On the field, the Rams reached the FA Cup semi-final of 1976.
Hill. Good play to Staley. McCreary is up. Hill. Trying to count it and does! Gordon Hill!
Dave Mackay's side had played their last big game. Soon Mackay was to have his last boardroom battle with a new chairman.
He demanded a vote of confidence on the grounds that George Hardy had said that the manager must go and that he was a hopeless manager. He went into the boardroom, said, unless that is withdrawn or unless a public statement of support is made, I'm going. And I think he found that everybody looked into their hands and stared at the ceiling, and he went.
I felt if Dave was to be sacked, he should be sacked for getting bad results, and if the club were struggling, but the club weren't struggling at the time. I think we'd finished 6th in the league. I think the reason why Dave Mackay was sacked was purely and solely to bring Brian Clough back to Derby County.
Well, I made a statement, really, and I made this in the boardroom. And I said, which is a thing that I've probably never said in my whole life, the man upstairs will look after you lot, and I mean directors. Only directors. And for that day on, Derby didn't get any better, they just got worse.
Crucify the fans, crucify the board. Are you coming back, Brian? Oh, no. Come on, please.
Brian Clough did come back in early 1977, by now manager of Nottingham Forest. He was offered his old job. The fans wanted him back, Derby's board wanted him back, the reporters wanted a story.
So flattered and so elated and so of everything, every single emotion that's possible, when I was approached to come back, that it's taken so long to say no. But that's the decision.
I was quite happy where I was. I was happy working at Forest. They gave me a job when I was out of work, and I thought there was things to be done here and all that type of thing, and it was a good decision.
Clough's partner Peter Taylor returned 5 years and 4 managers later. The star players had long gone. Derby were bottom of Division 2.
All I know is their current position is diabolical, and somebody, somewhere, hasn't been pulling their weight. Well, it's my job to find out who those people are immediately. So that's the immediate job. Who's with us, who's against us, etc., etc. That's the first job.
But now Koppel. Right side, far side. This is the best chance of the match, and it's made the count.
Despite that cup defeat, Taylor kept Derby in the second division for a season. He made wholesale changes, losses on transfers, but reached the FA Cup quarter-final next season at lowly Plymouth. With that sort of luck, the replay at Derby looked like a formality.
Ruzeller's on the near post, comes away, and Cherry in trouble, it's straight in!
It wasn't as bad as what people made it out to be. I think on the field it wasn't too bad, but off the field it was a bit of a disaster. The players weren't getting wages. You know, we're going up to 4 or 5 weeks not getting wages. I was lucky because I had a very understanding bank manager. A lot of the players had a lot of problems.
Then more problems, relegation to Division 3, the sack for Peter Taylor. Derby's last real chance of avoiding the drop evaporated at Newcastle. The home team had every incentive to crush the Rams. They were after promotion to Division 1. Newcastle won so easily, Derby might have done better to stay away. The man in charge of the scoreboard apparently thought they had. He forgot to put up the visitors' names. It was a telling comment on a football club in desperate circumstances. They faced a winding up order in court, could only trade on memories and hope a millionaire would bail them out.
They were in the knacker's yard. The directors had exhausted all of their resources. They were hugely in debt. They'd lost millions of pounds. A really very sad story for what has been one of the great clubs of England and Europe.
I had firm belief that this club had a future, it certainly had a past, and I was convinced that with the supporters we got, there's only one way forward. And I put everything behind it, and I think it's proved the point today, hasn't it? It's back to the first division.
Stuart Webb stuck firm to the belief that the club could be saved, and he always looked at what had been done in the past and felt that that made it a very good club to sell to somebody. And eventually he found someone who was prepared to buy in the Maxwell family. A lot of creditors were able to say, well, look, all right, I'll accept 50p in the pound. Directors made phenomenal further sacrifices to cut what they owed to the club. And eventually a package was rushed into the High Court with about 5 minutes to spare.
Ian Maxwell, son of Robert, bought Derby County. He bought it from Stuart Webb, who'd bought it from the directors. Maxwell appointed Webb, once club secretary, to be its managing director. Webb, a football fanatic as well as a shrewd businessman, had already hired a manager. Arthur Cox, the man whose team had dumped Derby into Division 3, had fallen out with Newcastle. He'd been promised a rise. The rise was slow in coming. Webb moved in.
I'd seen him before, I'd seen him work with players, and when he was in dispute with Newcastle over his contract, I couldn't believe the luck. So we dived in and we managed to persuade him to come down, and that again was a major significant point in the turning of Derby County's fortunes.
When we came, there was nine players were signed. One was already leaving, and the other 2 we had to discuss their contracts with them. So that's what we started with, and from there we've worked and brought players in and bullied them and encouraged them, and well, there we are. We've got them into the first division, haven't we?
Cox's first match was in the 3rd division. Conscious of the costly mistakes of the past, the board told him to pick up players on the cheap. He bought half a dozen for the price of a family car. The rest of the staff he inherited from Peter Taylor. Roy McFarland, assistant manager, was among them. His backing earned Cox early goodwill in the city. The team had many players who'd seen better days. That day at Bournemouth they lost, but they did try, and they played with pride, in front of thousands who travelled down from Derby. They were eternal optimists, fiercely loyal, glad to have a team at all. They soon made Derby the wealthiest club the 3rd division had seen in ages. She changed her hairstyle. One young man went even further.
Well, I changed my surname from Stack to Derby, and I'm now Mick Derby, like. Got a lot of pressure off my folks for it, and, you know, my mates thought it was quite interesting, but...
Why did you do it?
Just a love of Derby County and a pride in the city of Derby. It's as simple as that, you know. My club, my city, stand by them. Yeah.
Arthur Cox was given the money to bring in quality players. Among the first, Gary Micklewhite from Queen's Park Rangers for 80,000. Then John Gregory from the same club, 100,000. Phil G, a former decorator, came chiefly from non-league soccer. Later, much later, Nigel Callaghan signed from Watford. His fee, $140,000. The expensive imports had First Division skills, First Division habits. Those habits translated into something resembling football, something the crowd hadn't seen since the 70s. Their enthusiasm induced ex-internationals to Derby.
It's difficult really to pinpoint. All I could say really is to the general public here that they actually live for this club. You know, it's the talk of the shop floor on Monday mornings or whatever. It's the talk of the pubs. They really come along here, as you can see, in the thousands, week in, week out, as they have been for the last 10 years or so when they've had little or no success.
Well, I think money talks, and all footballers, because of the short time they have in a football career, tend to speak the language. And I'm sure that money was made available that compared to what was on offer elsewhere. But I think beyond that, again, there is a certain cachet in the name Derby County. And also, I think people did feel very confident that Arthur Cox was going to bring success.
Success came in Cox's second season. Derby clawed their way out of Division 3 in third place. That was good enough for the city. A civic reception followed. There was no band, no trophy, but the streets were lined all the same. The ghosts of the past were about to be laid. May 1987, Derby had taken Division 2 by storm. All they had to do to achieve promotion to the First Division was to draw with Leeds. 20,000 fans turned up. Those who couldn't get in could hear it on Radio Derby.
The ball knocked away and a fine piece of play by G. Gets away from Ormsby, half the length of the field, goes forward, and he scored! What a superb run! Half the length of the field by Phil G. There's a bit of an opening in front of him. Aspen closes it. Lovely ball along the penalty line to Micklewhite. Micklewhite spoons it back. Davison goes in and scores with a header. A move of exquisite construction. There it is. Derby County. Derby County are back in the First Division. Derby County 2, Leeds United 1.
Cox is better than Cloughie, they chanted. Cox himself would have none of it.
To me, the things that he's achieved in football have, you know, my mind pales into insignificance compared with what he's achieved, and obviously it's a great motivation to me. I mean, to think in terms of trying to do some of the things that he's done.
I don't think it pales into insignificance. What I think possibly Arthur's talking about is he'd like to go on and win First Divisions and get, when we eventually allow back into Europe, he wants Derby back there, and he wants them one of the leading sides in the First Division. That'll be a big job for him. Sometimes it's harder to hang on to success when you've got a little bit than achieving it.
Enter Robert Maxwell, the new Derby chairman. The owner of the Daily Mirror weighed in with headlines about Clough and Forest.
This is traditional rivalry, and Big Mouth Clough should belt up a little, and we will make him hold his tongue by the way Derby knocks him and his team into the ground.
Maxwell has knocked pipes into the ground, paying £140,000 for undersoil heating to stop games being postponed in winter. That's not the only investment. England's goalkeeper came too. Some said £1 million had been spent without Arthur Cox knowing.
I certainly bought him. I negotiated the purchase. Arthur Cox knew everything about him. If Arthur had been at home, he would have participated in the negotiations. But I will make the final decision on whether we buy a player of that calibre and at that price.
We do tend to attract people who are slightly larger than life or think they are. And I think really it's going to be a very important factor in Derby's success, whether he is prepared to take a secondary role or whether he wants to be up front calling the shots all the time. I think if he's prepared to leave it to the professionals, to Arthur Cox and to Stuart Webb, to run it as it's been run for 3 years, then the club will carry on and prosper. If he interferes, frankly, then there are great dangers.
Derby police sensed danger and possible disorder in Maxwell's anti-Clough comments. They wrote and asked him to stop. He has.
He did great things for Derby. I have always thought, until a few years ago, that he would have made an outstanding manager for England. He's done great things for Forest, and we shall do our level best to keep all the points when we meet them at Derby and at Nottingham.
So Derby go into Division 1 a generation after Clough last took them there. Football eventually gave way to mudslinging and politics, which almost destroyed the club. No one wants a repetition.
Well, it won't happen because now we're running as a business. Beforehand, the control in the boardroom was lax. There was split within the board. Managers were spending money the club hadn't got. But now, as I said, we have a solid board, stability right through the club, and we've got a platform to launch this club into First Division in style.
The club went down because of bad management and rows in the boardroom. We have nothing but good management, and there certainly will be no rows in the boardroom.
Why?
I won't tolerate it.
I can't see there being another boardroom crisis because the board, apart from Maxwell, really has no status, no power. They're almost a social function in the club now, and I think they're enjoying it after all the warfare they've had. Maxwell will only cause a crisis if he decides to interfere personally in the running of the football side of the club, and if he encroaches into the role that Arthur Cox decides is his. That's the only possibility, and I hope Maxwell, who is nobody's fool, has the sense to keep clear of that province.
The directors at Derby, and I am not a director's man by any stretch of imagination, but they did write vast amounts of money off. So they have to be given a bouquet saying, well, thanks very much for sticking by the club. Everybody's delighted in the game now, and you should share the glory also. Because there's a lot of clubs where directors don't put a penny in.
We've had a few thin times, you know, but now everyone's revelling in it at the moment, you know. The city's been in a state of euphoria ever since we beat Leeds and we got promoted and that. You know, it's been tremendous, you know. And I don't think it'll really sink in until, like, sort of in the summer when the fixture list is produced, you know, and you're looking for games, you know, when are you playing Arsenal, when are you playing Man U and all this business, you know. Before it was, we used to look at fixture lists and think, oh, how far have we got to go on Boxing Day? How far have we got to go at Easter and all things like that, when the trains aren't running and you're struggling for transport and that. But now it's, you're looking at some of the, you know, you're in the big time. That's it, Derby County are back in the big time.